All right, welcome everybody to the York County Economic Development Meeting. Tonight we have present is, Councilmember Watts Huckabee and Councilmember Allison Love. Order of business tonight, we're going to start out with small business support, and having said that, I think we're going to start out with the business toolkit. So I'm going to, I guess, turn it over to you, Mitch, and we'll take it from there.
Sounds good.
Thank you, sir.
And I will just outline this to say I would envision that the items that are not in executive session probably would be short and brief from my standpoint from an update.
Okay.
But there are some projects in executive session I know will take some time, just as a heads up.
Sounds good. Appreciate that.
In terms of small business toolkit, give you all a quick update from our last meeting. And Tom, I know that you probably have spoke with Dean Fell with the chamber a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
But Dean has 2 interns that have come on board to work with him, and they have been working on, I guess, the back-end structure of creating this toolkit that can be put up on their website, and it's something that we would look to actually complement and have a similar piece on our website as well. And the intent of it really is just to give the framework of when there is a small business needing some support, who to contact, what process they need to go through, and try to get them to point A to point B as quick as possible, and be kind of a guide through that process.
Right.
So we anticipate that will come online probably by the end of January.
In June, okay. Yeah.
Dean and the interns, the last update I had was last week. Things are moving really well on that end, and I've actually got to meet the interns, extremely sharp. I think they're doing a great job.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to him too. It was good. And I think, again, this is going to continue to evolve, right, as we move forward and identify the needs of what's there, and as we incorporate, the power of other partners into it too. So, yeah, absolutely. Okay, very good. Thank you.
In terms of small business expansion support, I know what you had brought this up based on some meetings that we had. I think at the last council meeting, maybe even brought this up to send this committee. I may lean in on Josh a little bit, and you as well, Watts, to kind of outline what you're envisioning in terms of what support we need to be focused on in terms of expansion. But I know too, we have a couple examples where we've met with companies recently and kind of heard some of the challenges they're up against.
Right, and so I'll jump in here. One of the things we're trying to do is y'all make charges to committees and send them from council at the end of meetings to a committee. We want to first check in with the committee and make sure we understand as a committee what the charge was. So maybe tonight, Watts, if you could share what your charge was, kind of the why behind it, and we can better understand as a committee the problem definition, and then make sure we're all on the same page, and then staff, we know what we need to work on in order to bring back to the next committee for y'all to continue to work on it. I think, because Mitch and I think we know, but it's based on a meeting we had with you and a local business that's trying to grow, and we want to make sure we get to a solution, but first we want to understand the problem. So maybe if you wanted to just kind of share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when this topic came up originally, my hesitation on the topic was that I had heartburn over the county investing money in a startup business, because the majority of startup businesses failed, and an even greater percentage the second year, third year. So when we were out seeing a current business that's in the unincorporated area of the county, his problem was that he bought land back under a different code. And so years have passed, and now the code we're under currently is causing him to do some things that he was unaware of when he bought the property, so unintentional consequences. Number 2, here's a business owner that is hyper busy in his business, and he wants to expand, and to him it's as simple as, I need to get a permit to build a building, but it's not that simple. There's so much more to it, so that when he reached out to the county to say, what do I do to take the next step, then he gets an email from this person, and this person, and this person, and that person, with a list of things he's got to do. As you can imagine, his head's exploding, thinking, where do I start? I need to go hire someone to do a site plan, I need to hire an engineer, I gotta hire an architect, I gotta sketch it out. It gets complicated. So what happens 2 years later, we have a business that is successful in York County that has not built his building to double or triple his business. Who's gotten hurt from that? He has, and we have. So what are the solutions, or how can we help? Well, I think number one, when a current business owner wants to expand their business in York County, we need to have a process to help them. We need to be thinking about what they're going through and how we can help them through this process as easily, as quickly, as cost effectively as possible. So maybe that means we need, what do we, owns, how do you say that, owns, buds? Yeah, maybe we need that person, but right in the beginning, when we get a call from someone and they say, I wanna add on to my business, I wanna do this, and we know that it's not gonna be that simple, somebody needs to be assigned to that business person to help them work through this and to be successful in getting their business expanded. And then that also means, maybe, because I've heard different people on council say this, and I got to say at this point, the more I've learned over the last 2 years, maybe there's some flexibility in what we do, as an example, and then I'm gonna stop talking. The way code's written, he's supposed to pave his parking lot. Well, he's gotta bring trucks around his building and into the parking lot, and eventually, he's gonna have deferred maintenance on concrete or asphalt, because it's gonna get torn up. So why is gravel not appropriate somewhat? Maybe the drive boxes have concrete, but the parking lot's gravel, but our code doesn't allow that, I don't think. So that's an additional expense, obviously, to pave this huge parking lot, the driveway around the building and out onto 274 and down a road that he didn't have to do in the beginning, out into the side street that goes into, is it Bailey? I don't know what it's called. Anyway, whatever the development is, the road that goes into there. So, in short, a business owner, an existing business owner that wants to expand, we should have a process to help walk them through the process so they can successfully get through it and grow their business if that's what they're choosing to do. Now, I mean, y'all thought of things, I'm interested in hearing, you know, you were there, Mitch, I'm interested, what have you thought about that we need to do as a result of what you heard?
I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is the fact he got overwhelmed and just kind of quit in
Yeah.
the process. It's gonna cost us revenue if you think about the fact that he could expand on, and that's a new structure, new employees, things along that go with it. But I think that the big thing is that's creating a pretty bad culture. If that's the environment that we're, you know, that's how we're reacting to it, or at least that's the impression that he has. We gotta fix that.
Yeah, and we see this, and it's not necessarily the planning department's fault, but there are things we can do differently, and we can get a better outcome from this.
What type of business is that?
Cabinet business?
So can I give another example?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So Josh is familiar with this example, and I think for a couple of you in this room that know how much business this place does, the River Act, the old River Act would like to open back up. And they, for about a year, I've been trying to get the county to help with that. And they have a tenant who would be a phenomenal tenant, who would love to come, and they've also got an empty lot beside them that they would like to sell, and that would be also something, kind of a good thing for the area. The issue is their sewer, and so the county doesn't want to, I don't know what the technicalities are. Josh, you know, I'm sure, but if the county were, in other words, when this restaurant owner contacts the apartments that are behind his location and says, hey, I'm wanting to connect to your sewer, they go, oh, we're scared, what does that mean? And then they go to the next people down and they say, hey, we'd like to connect to your townhome, and it runs behind them, it cleans up the area behind them, but nobody understands it. But there's nobody from the county that can go out and say, hey, we're trying to get a business open here, and we need this easement, or we need to connect to this sewer line right here. So we have a restaurant now that's been sitting, you know how long it's been sitting empty? That's a very high volume restaurant. It's probably one of the highest volume, opportunities in the whole area. And so, anyway, so it's kind of the same thing. It's like, what can the county do to help facilitate, not necessarily take over what they need to do, not pay for what they need to do. I mean, they're willing to pay for it, but they need a person who will negotiate that for them. And I've run out of time. I'm working on it, but I've run out of time. And so, it's frustrating to me, because this is I'm not gonna say who the tenant is, but it would be a phenomenal thing for York County.
Mhm.
So-
Yeah, and that's good. I just want to piggyback off that too. I mean, so when I reached out to you today in regards to the strap business that's in
Mhm.
Form 2, another
Yeah, I
prime
haven't had
example.
time to tell Mitch about it.
Yeah, another example of it. You've got a business that has been itching to expand. And the challenge is with when we will talk about the requirements under which they can expand on, they're willing to shift things around to meet what is needed. But at the same time, you know, we missed out 2 years ago or a year and a half ago on expanding this because there was zero flexibility in how we were approaching it. So I think that, and I think Watts, it's a really good thing because we do have a lot of mid-sized businesses, small businesses that want to expand to the next level.
Mhm.
And they don't fall under the abatement, you know, the fee and lieu world. So what do we do? You know, how do we work with them? And I think this is a good, you know, I think this really segues into, you got your toolkit for the starters, then you got your mid-size opportunity. So I think this is creating a very robust economic opportunity, you know, for all size.
Right, I agree, and I think what we've heard from you, because this agenda is coming from the workshop where we talked about the economic development goal. And these are the priorities that y'all shared at the workshop that are ending up on y'all's agenda. And I would agree that, you know, Watts, this charge that you sent, this really is symbolic of what we heard from y'all. Economic development looks a little different now in y'all's perspective, and you're asking us to think a little bit differently when it comes to local businesses when they're trying to expand. I think that what we can do, and it's great that Tom, our new assistant county manager over development services, works with both economic development and planning. That's intentional because so much of what they do, they need each other to do well. And so there's people, there's resources, there's education, and there's process. And I think what we'll do as staff is we'll explore that. We would love to go out and meet with this new business.
Yes.
And we can bring those examples back to y'all. But I just want to make sure that the table was wide, right? There's opportunity for us to bring back a menu, not just a specific solution. So what we'll do is we'll try to develop ideas. I've always had an ombudsperson where I've worked, and they're not always in planning. Sometimes they're in economic development, sometimes they're in the manager's office, because you often use that person to help you with recruitment of businesses, not just local businesses. And they help these new businesses navigate the same things we're talking about local businesses being navigated.
Perfect. No, that's good.
One quick closing comment. So the focus here is definitely on process. It's not necessarily to a specific
Okay,
business.
good,
It's
that's
about
helpful.
process. Number 2, 3, and 4 would be an ombudsman or ombudsperson, maybe grant money for specific items in the process that we can help this business owner that's been contributing to the economy. We're helping them some with a cap. I don't know what that looks like. And then consider easing our zoning requirements that are making it even more difficult and too expensive for them to do what it is they need to do.
Yeah, something we can look at, sure.
Well,
Can I expound briefly?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I've been here a very, very short time, David and I both, but I've been trying to lean into these kinds of topics that you're talking about. Now, the grants may be a different conversation, but I think I can tell you that there is initiative going on to create an ombudsman position, although maybe may not be approved until the next budget. And I'm doing my best to try to lean into the development codes that we have. They're very voluminous, to say the least. And in some regards, they should be, but as Mr. Kendry will agree, you know, a lot of regulatory ordinances can be both mandatory and permissive. And where they can be permissive, it gives you an opportunity to interpret, not break the spirit and intent of the code, but to try to work with people and see if you can work through the code to make sure there's balance and make sure that all potential parties are happy. Because I don't know where these particular examples of properties are. They sound like they could be in semi-rural areas, or, and, you know, you've got to consider neighborhoods and negative externalities that may be created. But it's very clear to me that you want to have a business-friendly environment for all scales of business. And I think that it's achievable, but having people who can talk to constituents, who can get out into the field more, I think is very critical. And my first observation is that's what we should be yearning for.
Great, and I think that meeting we have would be great to have.
I'll look for that once we get a date.
Oh, the other thing, though, you mentioned grants, you know, obviously we're bringing in a grant writer, right? So is there an opportunity there with that new grant writer that somehow we fit in a component or a widget from this that, you know, utilizes it? So I get just throwing thoughts out there on that one. So,
Yeah.
all right, any other discussion? All right, cool. All right, agricultural stakeholder engagement.
Sure. Josh may want to add to this as well, but he and I had breakfast with Tommy Atkins a few weeks ago, and we've asked Tommy to kind of be a line of support to make introductions to members of the ag community here in York County. With the intent that we want to engage with the stakeholders, understand what some of their challenges are, similar to what we've done with small business now, and get a better perspective of some of the challenges that us against and ways that we can actually support and help them. Going a little bit further on that conversation, I've been in contact with the Small Business Development Center. They had an ag specialist, his name is Jim Johnson. Had some really good conversations with him as well, just understanding some of the services that they can provide, and kind of having that top of mind as we go and talk to some of these individuals, if there's things tied to financial support, business planning, things along that line. And then lastly, one of the things we've been looking in within our department is trying to find ways that we can have more of that connection with the ag community to help sell their product, whether it be to a community or even restaurants here within the region. And so I went down to Greenville, South Carolina a few weeks ago and met with Swamp Rabbit Cafe and Grocery. They are a food hub for the Greenville region. And a big component of what they do is they operate a grocery store that has products that are grown right there within a radius of Greenville. But they also serve as a hub to local restaurants in the region to come and actually buy product direct from Greenville farmers as well.
I was just in there Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Phenomenal process of what they've done. They've got an amazing store right up against the trail. It's I was there on a Monday at 9 a.m. and it was bustling. I was really impressed. But I do think that there's opportunities as we look at the ag community, how we can really identify opportunities to make that more of our brand from a county standpoint and enhance really the business that's being done in the ag community and bring some of the retail component or service-based components in to support it as well.
Yeah.
I think in terms of small business and agriculture and other stakeholders related to this goal, the economic development goal, we need to listen. We want to explore and learn from those stakeholders what would help them. And so we are trying to listen first and then go from there. And I think that's what we're committed to doing.
I would add to that, there is a local place similar to what you're talking about that I've mentioned to Josh before, and I'll mention it again later, to check out, who's very interested in doing that type of thing.
Totally.
And then also, I would probably engage Farm Bureau in some of those,
Okay.
discussions.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
That's a good
definitely.
point.
Commissioner Weathers was very interested in us having a state farmers market here in York County.
Yep.
Not aware of that.
So that, you know, from a stakeholder perspective too, and I think that we also need to make sure the schools are part of the stakeholder component of it. Because as we build, you know, the evolution of farming needs to come from an educational standpoint. So I think they need to play a role as a stakeholder.
That's really important. When we had the agritourism committee working on behalf of the county, we met with all 4 school districts. They had all bought into the ag facility and wanted to be a part of it. They were gonna, and Clover and York have done a lot with it since those discussions, but Rock Hill and Fort Mill have done the same, so I agree. If you wanna preserve agriculture in your area, you should feed it with your youth.
You got it.
So you gotta promote ag ed in the classroom, which brings the parents and grandparents back in, and then you have a chance at resurrecting something that's dying throughout the US and York County.
And, you know, based on the Farm Bureau meetings that we've had and stuff, and these guys all can contest to that, you know, the education that we received on what you can do on 2 acres of land and make a living off of it, depending on what you're growing, I think that, again, that's all part of the youth movement, but it's also part of, you've got people that may want to change what they're doing and grab 2 acres of land and have a mini farm. You know what I mean? I think that's, all that education needs to go out at all levels, you know, in those specialized, unique farms that are 2 and 3 acres where they can make a living off it. We need to bring somebody in here to talk about, you know, what is the process behind that.
That's good.
Having a centralized location for that education is pretty important too.
Good discussion, guys. Anything else? No? All right, cool. All right, economic development, visioning.
Yeah, so this is a theme that we've heard from y'all in the development of the strategic plan, where y'all as council want to speak into how we target businesses and what we're looking for. So if you go to our website now, we've got 6 target areas. Are those still the 6 target areas that y'all as a council want us to be focused on? What is our opportunity to get more strategic? If we think about opportunities in York County to bring in businesses, how do we become more specific in what we're looking for and do more specific recruiting to bring in those businesses to our county? What does it look like to do economic development in different areas of the county? It doesn't look the same in one or the other. Our opportunity to really bring in y'all's vision into all this work is to put in some work in the new year. So I know everybody likes to say new year, new us, but new calendar year, new economic development vision. We want to bring to y'all an idea, a potential idea of really spending time with y'all and bringing in a potential consultant to help develop a targeted vision for economic development and criteria for incentives and other things along those lines that will allow us to really make sure we're following through with y'all's vision when we're doing recruiting into the future. And so that's what this is really about. We need your help, your commitment as a committee to work on this, but we're also open to talking more about what this could look like in terms of scope. Mitch, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, I'm happy to read off what our target industries say right now, and if you want me to do that, I figure that might give perspective into the conversation.
Yeah.
You know, today when a company is looking to locate, the way we're presenting York County is we're looking for advanced materials, chemicals, transportation equipment, food products, business professional service, corporate office, and distribution of the business. And so that's playing to some of the strengths, but also that's also being, you know, the person inviting you in to say, this is what we're interested in. And I think it's really critical for us as York County, for the council and per department, to be pretty strategic to think, where do we really want to go and how do we envision getting there?
So let me ask you, so, you know, I mean, I think to me, partnership with local municipality, I think, is key in this process, right? So you look at what we'll see in coming out of, say, for example, Rock Hill, and how they may be looking at health sciences, right? For that, you know, from that perspective. So I think holistically, I think that getting a consultant to look at that in a price point too. What level jobs what is our price point?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So where does that variable hit based on our price point, and what are they doing around us? The other thing too, and I'll turn it over to you guys, is that structurally, I mean, I look at this again as a tree, right? And we've got 6 points. Well, what are we hanging on each one of these limbs, right? So what are our subtitles for each of these upper level titles, right? So how are we baking these out, and as we grow and these roots are starting to expand? I would like to see a visual on this, how we categorize each of the 6, and these are the things that are falling under these categories, but I think, to me, I'm a visual person, and if we see that in a visual structure, I think it helps, at least myself, to help it to see, is this really growing in the right direction? Are we imbalanced in some areas too, or is there cross-pollination between some?
Right. And I think a consultant could help with that.
Right, yeah, so anyways,
Mhm.
yeah. See y'all.
Okay.
No,
The other thing I would say is, I've served as y'all's liaison, you know, for a time period, but I'm not always gonna be your liaison, with Tom Couch here, and this being his department. In the new year, he'll be the liaison for this committee. And I will come when I can. Obviously, I like this committee. Y'all are doing great work, so I'll be here when I can, but Tom will be sitting here where I'm sitting, and working with Mitch. And I think I've seen them become a really good team already, real quick in this first week and a half, so. I'm excited.
I won't be here either, just as a reminder.
So I'm excited about the work we're undergoing here. This is really a great beginning, and I think working with a consultant to develop that targeted vision,
Yeah,
I think will help us be successful long term. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited about it.
no, I agree. Watts, did you have anything else on the vision you wanted to throw?
No,
You good? Okay. All right, next, approval of minutes, September 25th.
Motion to approve.
Second. All right, all in favor?
I,
All right, I guess this leads us up to executive session. Do I get a motion to go in an executive session?
Make a motion to go in executive session for economic development projects update, proposed contractual matter, consultant services, and proposed contractual matter, economic development initiative.
second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. considered for executive session been covered. Do I get an emotion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Sharon did. She did. No, she came out.
Kim.
Oh, sorry, y'all.
Oh.
She wasn't recording.
Oh, you weren't recording?
No, 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 no.
Oh, okay, well, let's go ahead and do it again. All right, there you go.
Okay.
That was just a practice. Okay, we're good. Okay. All right, we're gonna have to, are you all set?
I'm ready, go.
Okay, do we have anything, any motions coming out of executive session?
Motion to authorize staff to explore and negotiate economic development initiative as discussed in executive session.
Second. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, very good. Ayes have it. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Thank you all. Thank you. Hey,
The York County Council Workshop, December 10th, 2024, 6 p.m. workshop together. Our order of business is first to discuss our strategic plan goal of grow responsibly. And I'll just turn it over to you, Josh.
Yes, we're excited. This is the last of 3 series of the last 3 workshops. We've been talking about 2 of our strategic plan goals for the workshop. We appreciate y'all's dedication to developing the strategic plan with staff's help, but also re-engaging around 2 goals per workshop. Our goal here is for y'all to continue to speak into the priorities. So this is a 3-year strategic plan. You can't do everything in year 1 of a 3-year plan. So what we've been doing the last 2 meetings is what we're gonna do today. We've got our goal champions here from each of these goals, and I'll introduce them before they speak. They're gonna present similar slides in the past. We want y'all's feedback on these goals in terms of what you see are the priorities, what questions do you have as county council, as we've got our leaders in the room who are working to implement the strategic plan. I've carried this thing with me all around the county. I'm gonna carry it till I've got holes in it and I can't read it, but this is not a piece of paper that's getting dusty. This is a plan we're implementing, and I'm committed to that. So we want to continue to engage with y'all around this. So tonight, we're talking about 2 goals. The first one is grow responsibly. Our goal champion for that goal is our planning director, Jonathan Buono. He's supported by Mitch Miller, our interim economic development director, because remember, the economic development goal and the planning goal are married together. These are departments that have to be working together to be successful in achieving both of these goals. So we're partnering that, but Jonathan's going to give the presentation tonight like Mitch gave for his goal.
Thanks, Josh. And just so, I typically do this, I didn't do this at the outset. I'm surprised, but welcoming of such a large group of folks that are here to participate in the workshop. Usually we don't have as much participation. What I typically tell folks when we start this, the workshops are a little bit different than county council meetings. Those are action items. At a workshop, this is an opportunity for council to get educated, so we don't hear from the public typically unless there's a specific meeting item. I just wanted to make sure that folks who were here understood how the process works, so this is an education period for the council. Thank you, Josh.
So evening, y'all. I'm Jonathan Buono. I'm the planning director for the county, as Josh mentioned. So this is the Grow Responsibly goal of the county strategic plan. And as he mentioned, Mitch Miller and I, we've got a team that we're working together with. So our goal team has staff members from both the Economic Development Department and the Planning and Development Services Department. It's a large team, but there's a lot of work to do. We also have Greg Suskin as a contributor to that team as well, and likely as the years go on, we'll probably add more team members as we get to some of the initiatives. So the goal is grow responsibly. So what does that mean? So the longer phraseology here is to provide well-balanced planning and development services that empower economic development. So that's one of the reasons we have that partnership that's directly in the goal, and manages growth in a sustainable manner that reflects and protects your county's unique communities and heritage. So that's the goal. So there are 3 strategies that are associated with that goal that you have in front of you. So the first of those strategies is really around clarity and being solutions oriented. So a lot of those strategies are going to be some of the things that we tackle first, and then they become ongoing. So for example, we've already created a staff report for text amendments similar to what you all have received previously with rezonings, right? So it's the same type of structure. So there's a deeper analysis. It's not just an ordinance and here's a red line of text change. It's going to be, why is this coming forward? What's the analysis behind some of the changes? What are some of the other jurisdictions doing in this space? And what the text amendment might look like in terms of red line changes and what a recommendation might be. So there'll be 2 of those staff reports coming in your first meeting in January for some text amendments. So that's an example of something that we've already implemented. Some additional examples, we have an annual development report that you'll receive concurrently with the annual impact fee report. So when we talk about trends, when we talk about data, we'll have that in front of you so that you can digest on an annual basis. Where are permits going? What does development in your county look like? And we'll do the same thing for code amendments. By our ordinance, we're required to track those and to track interpretations and things that should be codified that we've made interpretations on as staff. So we'll have that as an annual report, and we're targeting July and every July thereafter ongoing. So you have an idea of, well, the county has changed these provisions in code, this is how it's worked, this is how it's had an effect or no effect, whatever the analysis is after the fact as well. So we're analyzing on both ends of any changes. The second strategy is related to quality and attainability. So sometimes those things can compete, and often do compete on price, right? The higher the quality, the higher the price, and the less attainable it becomes. So affordability is a priority established in the strategic plan, but so is quality. You want to have those place-making destinations for commercial development. So what does it take to draw those? So that's a balancing act. And the last is pacing growth to facilities, and that will be tied pretty hand in hand with the infrastructure goal, because you want to plan out your infrastructure, you want to assess what you have for infrastructure, and then make some really informed and deliberate decisions about which areas in the county are appropriate for growth and which are not, and making definitive statements about where those should be, and then planning for your facilities to match those decisions. So we'll expand facilities in areas where we think it's appropriate, and we're not even going to contemplate expansions to infrastructure where we don't think growth is appropriate, right? And then analyzing some of the tools to allow growth to pay for growth. Because growth is here, it's not going away, Charlotte's not going away, and that's a driver of a lot of the growth that we have in the county, excuse me. And so we need to be prepared to accept that population that comes in and direct it to the places that can sustain it. So there are 4 themes that we've identified in this goal. And I said this a few times, but stakeholder engagement is really a theme throughout the strategic plan across all of the goals, and that's no different here. And when we say stakeholders, we don't just mean developers, and we don't just mean private property owners. It's a bigger picture. I'll get into that in a second. But the other themes would be refining codes, so that's a lot of the clarity, that's a lot of the solutions orientation, right? Stronger communities has to do with attainability and what our development looks like, and sustainable growth, talking about those urban service areas. So here's what those themes are in a little more detail. So our stakeholders, they do include residents, they include developers, and farmers and businesses, and many others, including you all as decision makers, the planning commission, the zoning board, and others as stakeholders. So we really want to make sure that the stakeholder engagement efforts that we have in implementing the strategic plan is two-way. So the county is going to be communicating on what we're doing as council makes decisions and is contemplating decisions, and also getting input. So council's contemplating a change or is looking for some direction from the community, making sure that we do get that input. So refined codes is being responsive to change. Everything's changing about the county when we have this amount of growth pressure, right? And there's a lot of friction that comes with that, so the codes need to be responsive, and we need to be able to have a process that's quick on its feet to adapt to changing circumstances. Talked about that analytical approach to amendments, both before we contemplate a change and then looking back, how is a change working or not? And making codes a little more accessible, adding clarity. A lot of the county's codes are written in what some folks might call legalese, and that's intentional because you want to have it be interpreted in as few ways as possible. But there are things that you can do to make it a little more accessible, and that's breaking up big chunk paragraphs and making the organization make a lot more sense. Graphics go a long way. And try to solicit some more suggestions from the community on making those documents a lot more readable and accessible. to mention those stronger communities and having attainability, but we also have heard a lot from council about placemaking destinations, what's gonna be the next Baxter Village or Kingsley in the county, right? You wanna have that economic driver that's going to allure those businesses here and keep some of the small businesses that we have going. And having standards that are context appropriate, right? So if you want to have better looking residential development, that's a good goal to have, but on the same token, if you apply those standards universally, and maybe it impacts the viability of a project that was aiming to be affordable, so that context is important. And sustainable growth, analyzing the tools to pay for, have growth pay for itself in terms of the services that the county needs to provide to new residents, right? So whether that's impact fees, whether that's adequate public facilities ordinances, all those things we need to analyze. And having defined growth and conservation areas, we do have conservation efforts. We do have an urban services boundary, but that urban services boundary hasn't been examined in quite some time. So it's time to take a look at that, analyze that, have a committee formed to go through that, and really take a close look at where does the county want to accommodate new infrastructure, whether it comes from a developer, or whether it's intentional on the part of the county, and where do we want to exclude that entirely. And that goes hand in hand with our public facility planning. So those are the themes that we've identified. Yes, sir.
So, first of all, thank you for that. That was a good good overview, and, how you laid it out is structurally nice to, visually good. Thank you. And we mentioned, we kind of touched upon this a little bit in the ED meeting, is matter, we could come up with some amazing concept and ideations, but at the end of the day, if we don't see what the value we want to see out of it, and the measurables against that, to me, that's real important. Now, we had a discussion earlier about that in our meeting, but I think that as we go down through there, and we check the box, I think we gotta be very clear, to me, is what is the value I want to see back from this? And is this quantifiable value, and is consistent value? And how does that measure up against what our vision is for the community, all right? Because there's a lot of, you can measure value in a lot of different ways, but I just wanna make sure we're measuring ourselves as we're going through this, and we can bounce it against the KPIs, as I mentioned earlier. So again, I just want to bring that back up again. Yeah.
And we're committed to developing outcome measures, KPI, for each of these goals. As we get into it, we want to develop the goals and the teams first and start the work. But we are committed next time around to bringing back what we think are good measures of that.
Okay.
And we're going to do that with our departmental plans as well. So
Yep.
we're committed to using more data as a county, and I believe in that, and think it makes us better.
Yes,
Just want to get the strategy going first.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. Thank you.
What else, y'all, in terms of feedback, thoughts, priorities? In other goal conversations, y'all thought about what you want to assign in terms of the committee. So in this room, we have the Planning and Zoning Committee. In the next goal, we've got the Public Safety Committee. But this is y'all's opportunity to speak into what potential priorities we send on to that committee.
What spoke to me was, and as you go through the strategic plan, and I'll go specific to 1F, we talked about this in our economic development meeting, and that is creating a process that takes advantage of an ombuds person. In the process of an existing business in the county, as an example, is looking to expand, having that contact help walk them through the process and make that process easier, more efficient. Maybe there's a way for us to collaborate, but in F, it talks about county code more user-friendly. So a little flexibility in the code to help someone do what it is they need to do that helps us as a county generate more property taxes, but also helps a business owner grow because of their business. Then in number 2, really A, B, and C spoke to me. So I don't know if it's time for us to refer this to committee, health and environmental maybe, to begin to dig into workforce housing, creating a stakeholder group to come up with a comprehensive housing strategy. And then C, kind of speaks to the same thing. So there's obviously a significant need for affordable housing. You kind of spoke to it a minute ago. Affordable housing is not necessarily a single wide, double wide, or a container home, but it could be a lot of things today, actually. And so I'd like to see that referred to committee so that we can begin to dig into what this could look like for York County. It's an issue all around the country, and for whatever reason, governments haven't really dealt with this issue, and I'd like to see us dig into it, really dig into it and address it, and come out of this with some solutions and us building thousands of affordable homes for people to purchase here in York County. Not us, but working on lessening the restrictions that you talked about, still having an aesthetically appealing home for someone to live in, looking at our ordinances. Anyway, I'd like to refer that to committee. And then number 3 spoke to me were adequate public facilities. Whether that's what they're doing in Florida, I don't know, but what speaks to me is as this county continues to grow, assuming that we can intentionally plan out what that actually looks like long-term in the unincorporated areas of the county. As a developer builds 250 homes in a development in a neighborhood, that's gonna create other expenses down the road that somebody's got to pay for. And so whether it's a collaboration between the county and the developer to put money in buckets to fill these buckets, or road improvement, they could include the need for turn lanes and deceleration lanes, sidewalks, pedestrian, bike, police, fire, water and sewer, county services in general, parks, schools. I think we need to be filling those buckets moving forward, whether it's us, but specifically the developers and those individuals that are building the houses, paying a fee to fill these buckets, so when the time comes, we need to pay for that infrastructure. We're not taxing the taxpayers of the future, we're taxing those that are theoretically causing the growth now. So I'd like to see that referred to committee, and I don't know if that goes to health and environmental, what committee that goes to, but I'd like to see that addressed.
I'll jump in right here. I know at the last meeting, during the new non-agenda comments, I mentioned about us getting together, work on the tiny house option or something to make things a little more affordable. So we definitely, that needs to be part of whatever goes to committee when we start discussing what future changes that we can make to make things more affordable. Looking at what other options out there. I know Box mentioned something about, you see a lot on social media and articles about container homes. Is that an option that we want to look at? Tiny homes, is that an option? Because these are cheaper or less expensive, nothing's cheap. These are less expensive ways to traditional building, stick-built homes. Of course, we have a thing come up a little over a year or so ago about mobile homes. Affordable, nobody wants it near their home. So we gotta try to figure out what's tolerable and what's doable and what's affordable that we can allow, that we can permit, because we know the municipalities, they have their strict guidelines that they have, but we, being the county, we can have it a little more relaxed and a little more, make it a little more affordable to be in the county, but we have to make some certain exceptions, I think, to do that. And Allison's been talking about adequate public facilities for a couple of years now. We gotta find a way to offset some of those future costs that these huge subdivisions are bringing to, and gonna be a future cost down the road. I think it came up about us doing impact fees. I don't think we can do an impact fee, but there's a way that we can, am I correct in that? Can the county impose an impact fee that we can take advantage of?
Yes.
So that needs to be an option that we look at, putting something to the side to offset some of these future costs, because we're gonna be the ones left holding the bag, whether it's with we know the roads, we know the facilities, so we gotta try to do something. Otherwise, it's gonna be hard to get 7 people to sit up here to increase taxes to cover that. So we gotta defray that cost some way, somehow, either now or down the road. And what she mentioned about us having that flexibility in some of our codes. Jonathan, Diane, everybody on the staff have known, for years I've been saying, I want our planning staff to have this flexibility because we can't live by just the black and white because everything doesn't fit into a box. So I've been saying that for years and I think the message has gotten through and I think we're on that track. But I just wanted to kind of reiterate, one of the things that's come up recently about when property owners are so close to meeting the lot size. I think that's on our radar now to help people if they're 2/10 off or a quarter off, you know, being that flexible county that we recognize everything's not gonna be to the black and white. But at all costs, if we can make it work, let's make it work. Some things we're not gonna be able to make it work. So, I would say keep looking for those ways to help people. Because if we say no, there's nowhere else they can go to get a yes and still live in your county. So we want to keep that in mind.
Well, my biggest thing is follow up a little bit with what Buck said. I have no problem with people living in trailers. I also recognize there's still a lot of people in York County, some that don't make $20,000 a year. And I also recognize that there's a lot of young people born and raised here in York County that are getting pushed out of York County because they can't afford to live in York County. And we've allowed people to come in here that have added to this growth and this boom and have pushed these youngsters out. And I personally feel if a man can scrape up the money to buy him some property, that whether he lives in a mobile home, tiny house, or whatever, it doesn't bother me. And a lot of times I get a lot of calls, and I'm sure the rest of you have, of people that call up and say, well, that's hurting my property value. And a lot of times these people have built a $500,000 house on 8,000 square foot. They ain't got no property value. They got a $500,000 house, but they sit there and they try to tell a man that may live in a house at the time when he built it, may not been $120,000, but he owns land. He's got property value. And what I see, especially in my district, where a lot of it's rural life, we don't want the municipality zone. And which we're gonna get to talking about the rural zone and all that. And the way the people wanna live in the municipalities, that's fine. But out in the rural areas, now none of us wanna see no slums, but at the same time, everybody just don't make the same thing. And people have got to be able to live, and God don't think no lesser of those people than he does anyone else.
So y'all have said a lot of things here, and I wanna point us back to the strategic planning work y'all did when we developed these initiatives. So if you go to 2A, which is identify the hurdles to attainable and workforce housing, that's doing research, that's understanding the context of York County, that's understanding how we got here and what our residents are facing. Now, that might lead to looking at solutions that y'all have thrown out here that a committee could talk about. But I think in terms of the strategic plan, the importance is that we understand the context first, we do research, and y'all have all thrown out different ideas on how we might address what we find out. So I think that's part of the strategic planning process. If this goes to committee, if y'all decide to send it to committee, it's important that the committee look at the problem first, identify the problem, do some problem definition, which we did in the ED committee on a similar thing, and really get your arms around as a committee what that problem is before we dig into solutions. And those things y'all mentioned might be those solutions. But the way y'all developed the plan wasn't to list solutions, it was to list, let's go do this work to understand these problems, and then we're gonna work together to figure out how to best address this. So I hear you, I think this is good feedback for us as we try to package what we study and what we bring back to y'all so that y'all can get into these ideas.
I mean,
Yeah, and I think in terms of how we approach our discussion here today, typically what we do is we allow each council member the opportunity for the floor, just to say what they think, you know, where they are, and then,
Yep.
and then we gotta figure out, you know, where does that put us? So if there are other council members who haven't said anything yet, I wait till the end, so.
I think the point about stronger communities is very important. And as far as housing attainability, it's a struggle for not just York County, but everywhere, because land, they don't make any more land, and the municipalities are gobbling up the county. So we're losing land that way, and it's gonna be a challenge. It really is for us to put our heads together on how to work with developers, and growth pays for growth could be an impact fee. That's growth pays for growth. But then we've got our school impact fees on top of, if we had an impact fee, you know, that's very real. I mean, we're gonna have an impact fee from the schools. Okay, and so then you've got your, I just think that I would like to see us take advantage of the fact that when a developer wants to come in, that we need to set up new priorities for that developer. He's taken advantage of a lot of property we have left, and then we have a very beautiful county. He wants to put a nice development here, then there are things that they need to do for the community and for the county when they come in. So I hope that we get some clear definition on that. And then as far as redefining codes, that is something that I hope we don't do too quickly. I hope we really take our time and really look into our codes and make sure that we're right on that.
So, I don't have a lot of time left, but I have a lot to say and a lot of thoughts about this. And one of those things is that, and I've mentioned this in the past, until municipalities and the schools and the county work hand in hand, everything that we're talking about is counterproductive to housing attainability. I think we have to define housing attainability for one thing. You know, you might live in Atlanta, but not everybody can live in Buckhead. So I think you gotta think about that. And so attainability is different in different areas maybe. So, but when you've got a school district looking at a $29,000 impact fee, you got a municipality talking about a multi-$1,000 impact fee, and then you got the county talking about adequate public facilities. You're not anywhere near housing attainability. Because when we're talking about housing attainability, I don't think we're talking about houses that are already built. I think we're talking about future housing. You know, because what's here now is as attainable as it's gonna get, right? Unless it drops down in value for some reason. But I just don't think every individual entity working individually to come up with what these developers are gonna pay, it's all passed along to the future residents of York County. A lot of it's passed along to current residents of York County. So until we get ahead of schools and say, hey, can you pull the reins in a little bit and let's talk about this overall, you know, because they gotta build schools, but you know what, they also they don't want their buses traveling on roads filled with potholes. And so it's just, I just don't see everybody working together, and there's so much infrastructure that's needed, and so it just appears that schools are way out ahead of all the other conversations that the municipalities and the county is having overall. And I think that in a few years, you know, we're gonna look back and we're gonna go, oh my gosh, what could we have done had we all worked together to come up with the right plan? And the county's talking about parks and fun things, but we have serious things. We've got very serious things that need to be addressed. And, I'm hoping that council and future council, realizes that those things aren't going away. They're not going away, they're not getting better, they're getting worse. So housing attainability, if that really legitimately is on this list, then we need to redirect some of how we get there, in my opinion.
So, yeah, let me take mine and then we'll open it up. So, I took notes of what everybody said, and I think to Josh's point, really our job, and the first meeting on this, when it comes to grow responsibly, is always the hardest, because everybody thinks about things differently, but I know what council supported was the goal. Basically, we want planning and development to be working with economic development departments, and we want to grow in a sustainable way. You know, to me, what I think our council kept saying repeatedly was, first of all, we need to be more proactive in our visionary process, which I think we are starting to do. But we need to take care of what we got, and then anything new that comes on, we need to make sure that we have articulated what is the cost to the community to come here, and is that a value? Because I'll never forget, I mean, we are very blessed as a county, and we don't have to take everything that comes across the table. But I do think that when I look through these strategies, and so as I see these 3 strategies, and when I remember when we had this discussion at council, when we approved the reading of this strategic plan, this was one of those areas that I think we had a lot of changes to, and a lot of differences from council. Council really kind of piped in. But I think one of the main things that I keep hearing our council say repeatedly is that we've got to simplify the county code. It's got to be more user-friendly, and it's got to basically do what we say we want the goal to be. And that is to, you know, right now we have hurdles. We talk about affordable housing, we also, in the same hand, are saying you can't build a house on more than 5 acres, which is a problem. We don't even let our own people build a house for their kid next door, which is a departure from our current. So to me, one of the key priorities is we gotta simplify the code, and we gotta make sure the code does what we intended it to do, which is look out for the people that lived here for years and years, let them do what they need to do with their property, let their child build a house there without too much rigmarole, and let's figure out that solution. To me, that's the biggest priority from number 1 for me. When it comes to developing solutions for attainable housing, what I think gets lost in the conversation is there is a major difference between Section 8 housing and attainable workforce housing. And I went to, and I know several of my council members were there, went to the meeting with the utility providers, and there was discussion from Dr. Ulrich, a fantastic speaker. You can debate what you want to with that, but the information she brought to the table and the discussion that I had in that room is probably the best discussion that I continue to have every year, and it is, let's talk about and let's be bold in how we're going to develop things. Let's find a place if there's a certain area of the community that needs to be developed. I mean, I consider I-77 to be the beachfront property of York County. Let's make sure that when we invite a business here, that they're contributing to the community in creative ways. And a lot of counties are ahead of us on this. I think that we need to look and see, because some folks, what they're doing is when you come in, they're requiring that some of these folks contribute to a fund that says there's teacher housing on site for this folks. That's a big deal. And that really is counterintuitive to incentives. We don't need to give incentives for everything that comes across. We need to attract quality. So in my mind, number 2, to me, the number 1 issue that I think before we even start having these conversations about tiny houses, because it's my understanding the county doesn't restrict how small your house has to be. What we restrict is you can't have 45 houses on an acre, and I don't think we want to change that. So tiny houses, in my mind, really aren't, unless we're talking about wanting to get in the business of having a tiny house, you know, village that has tons of density, that's not what we've said, that's a different question. I think the bigger question on number 2 is, and the primary question is, identify the hurdles to actual workforce housing, and then how do we translate that into developers paying for that, new ones coming in, paying for that. We gotta take care of our own, then how do we tell somebody new coming in here, hey, you're coming here, this is a great place to be, this is what needs to happen. And then on number 3, I do still think that if we don't take a more proactive approach to preservation, it's gonna be gone, it's gonna be done. So, I mean, those are the priorities of this list that I feel like I hear council being consistent on. Josh, you've asked us, you know, we all say what we wanna say, and then now we got to figure out what do we do with it. In my mind, we would refer to committee those priorities, and I just need to hear from council if there's an objection to what I'm saying here, or how we refer that out. How do we take the next step?
Just refer it to committee, and let the committee get to work with staff and
Yeah.
the strategic partners in York County that are already in the space that we're addressing, and
Yeah.
then we can come back, the committee will come back to council and educate council on what they've learned.
Well, but I think we have to understand which committees though too, as we look at, because we can parse these out to certain committees that's more targeted.
So
I agree with you.
When it comes to simplifying, making the county code user-friendly, that clearly is a planning and zoning committee priority. I think that definitely needs to go there, and I get calls every day, I need help simplifying this, and really accomplishing the goal of how do we let our families who are here do what they need to do with their property.
Yeah.
Is there an objection to that one going to planning and zoning?
No,
All right.
no, not at all.
When it comes to, and I'm sorry, I don't have the committee lineup here, but when it comes to the item number 2, identifying the hurdles to attainable in workforce housing, and again, there's a very big distinction here, it's not section 8, it's teachers, it's firefighters, it's folks who workforce housing.
It's actually really broad, if you hadn't spent any time in it. There's so much going on in this county right now on this topic, things that would just blow your mind if you knew what all was going on. So once this goes to committee and it comes back out, you'll be amazed at what's happening already in the county. But I would think this goes to health and environmental.
Yeah, I'd probably recommend that too.
Do
So,
you have that list up, Mr. Kendry, of what it is? Is that health and environmental?
Aren't you guys already working on some, you know, we referred to the land, you know, how many acres per house? You guys were supposed to be working on a new plan there.
So that's the rural zoning study?
Yes.
And staff is working on scoping that project, and it is something that we can work with the planning and zoning committee as
Right.
staff works on that. I know both Tom, our assistant county manager, and Jonathan are committed to working on that project, and we can keep the planning and zoning committee updated on that. That's the first opportunity to really try to make the code more simple. I think it's a good slice of the pie to start with. and
So
really
that's
move on.
the planning and zoning, right?
yeah, I would recommend we look at these because we refer them to the appropriate committees as we go through this, right?
Yep.
But the other thing too, just a quick comment, you know, when I'm looking at this thing, and I meant to make the comment, when I look at this overall, I also think we need to make sure we have a stakeholder engagement continue with our municipalities as we go through this process. You know, you've got York, you've got Rock Hill, et cetera. So I think they play a big role from a partnership perspective in how we jointly work together on these things. The other thing is, when I'm looking at this too, I just want to make sure we don't overlook the parks, right? And I know we have a segment for the parks, but I think that strategically there's so many values that come out of the parks that I think that we just gotta make sure we keep that piece of the puzzle fit into the overall priorities. So.
That's with health and environmental as well.
Right, exactly. And I think that strategically, there's quality of life, there's economic opportunities, there's many different aspects of that, so.
I haven't pulled up, Madam Chair.
I guess I'm looking through these, and I have no problem at all with it going to health and environmental, if what we're talking about is to have the opening, like, push it to committee for y'all to identify the hurdles and help us to identify the way to approach this. I think the way this is set up with Grow Responsibly though, it probably was a planning economic development task force approach, so I don't know if we need to, I'm fine with us starting with health and environmental, and if later we determine that it's more of a joint group promote, I think that might be more, that might work.
Well, it indirectly helps economic development, because if you can eventually deliver affordable housing to the citizens of your county, then the livable wage begins to drop a little bit theoretically.
I think in terms of
Which
economic,
makes us even more favorable for industry to choose to come here than to go somewhere else.
I think when it comes to economic development, what we're talking about is we're asking new developers to build this in, because they're coming here and they need to consider that. So I think that might end up being where we'll be, but I have no problem with initially referring it to health and environmental until we,
The whole thing?
Just
what? What part?
to be identifying the hurdles to
two.
attainable and
Number
workforce
two.
housing. Number two.
Right.
A, B, and C.
Well, but it also, right, but it lends also to
think it's
the
a
workforce
joint one.
activity that, the chamber has been driving,
I don't
right? I
see
mean, workforce
health and- I don't
availability.
see health
That's
and
not
environmental.
Chambers can go.
zoning plan.
Okay. I'm hearing from two folks over here that they think that's a planning and zoning issue.
Mhm.
To me, it's a joint economic development planning. I think that's what this whole Grow Responsibly is.
Okay.
Either way,
Yeah.
I need,
I personally like the fact that John's going to be involved, because we spent a lot of time talking about this, and he has a passion for it, so I think we have good representation from, not that anybody else's staff wouldn't have it, but, so,
And potentially, we decide later what committees to send this to. I think if there's
Yeah,
some disagreement, I don't want to slow down tonight to
I think
get a
Yeah.
that's the
specific
goal.
committee.
That's the goal that we got to start with, is that first one there and identifying that.
And
I
you
think-
you mentioned the second one, that there's agreement on sending to committee, we just need to know what committee you're gonna send it to. But I'll mention a third one.
You said
I
A,
think-
B, and C is going to.
I think starting with A, with the hurdles to exploring those. I don't know, we need to jump to architectural stuff until we actually identify the hurdles and identify the affordable. As I understood it, you guys were gonna engage in an affordable housing, use the folks that, I mean, Watson's mentioned this, I'm not aware of this, he's mentioned that some of our city folks have already done some studies on this and have some information to share. Y'all were gonna pull that together and have a discussion about that at the meetings, whether it's health and environmental or a joint planning and zoning and economic development task force approach. Either one of those, I think, probably works, as long as they're both together.
well, if I stay on the Health and Environmental Committee as a member, I'd love to tackle this one, because this was important to me when I ran for council.
Now, which one is it? Where we at?
The Affordable Attainable Workforce Housing Initiative.
And these are all blended, there's not gonna be one perfect committee, because each of,
Right.
everything that's
How many
complex,
would
that's
be?
worth
Well,
solving.
there's
I
cross
say planning and
pollination, there's cross
zoning, he
pollination,
says,
yeah, between the
you know.
committees.
I think Jonathan's participation is typically with planning and zoning and to some extent economic development, whereas the liaisons to health and environmental have been Catherine and,
But some of this is gonna bleed over.
Right.
Yeah, it's gonna
Because
bleed,
We're
it's
gonna have to
gonna-
look at our ordinances and
Right.
maybe consider
Josh, I think-
amending some of our
Yeah.
ordinances.
I think you're hearing what we're trying to get to.
Yes.
You'll help us
Mhm.
identify the
I
right
will.
place to put
Yeah.
it and
Okay.
start.
Yeah.
Got it.
Maybe we do.
Before we get too much further down the road here, what I wanted to say a little bit ago,
what's that?
because I brought it up one time before, on the impact fees. Because I brought it up about researching, because I'd be all in favor for impact fees if they did work and it did go to the ones causing the impact. But I would like for it to be researched out and see if I'm wrong on the fact that when you do the impact fees, you push the original folks out because you just change the demographic of people that can afford, and that is all that ends up moving in the area.
Yeah, I don't know if that research exists, or if we're gonna be able to develop
Undoubtedly
That's
it
a
does,
complex-
because
sounds
that's
like
what's
a
happening
doctor's
everywhere
required for that.
everywhere that's been tried, that's what's happened.
Right. I think that's
Whether
a
you talk
question,
about school or whatever, that's what's happened.
yeah, I think that's a
And
question.
it
related to-
pushes local people out, cause they can't afford no longer to live there.
Was there a third,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's
Yes.
3 goals,
Right.
3 strategies. The main point being, how do we address the preservation piece?
I think you've got York County Forever in place, and you are already addressing it. So I think some of you might be wanting to save some properties from development that you might not want to see, and to use taxpayer money for that is probably the least conservative thing I know of. But preservation, I mean, you've got York County Forever. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy people's properties and have them retain it. And you're funding that.
Well, I think we have to think broader than that. I do think that you were successful in your district raising the taxes in order to buy property for preservation
It was
purposes.
voted on. It was not something that was shoved down our
Right,
throats, but it was
but I'm
voted on.
saying to suggest that it's not something that's addressed, I do think that York County Forever is our, group that's done that. I guess when we're trying, what we agreed on in our approval of the plan was to, continue to partnership with those groups and also evaluate the tools for growth to pay
So
for growth.
what else are you
So-
wanting to preserve? You've got 1,900 acres in your district. You've got Worth Mountain, you've got Nanny's Mountain, you've got 87 acres at Wood End Farm. You've got a lot of properties. And I think probably my concern with this is that we're talking about buying more and we haven't done anything with the ones we have. So it's been 4 years since the taxpayers in Lake Wiley purchased properties, a lot of properties. And nothing's been done, and there's no interest, there appears to be no interest by this council to do anything. I've taken a lot of heat for this, because there's no dog park, there's no this, there's no that, there's no anything that the council, that the people voted for, and yet on this council, there's nobody that has any interest in those properties being developed into what the people, these are people that tax themselves.
Well, I don't think that's true, and I think what we've got, I think what council decided at the Parks meeting was that we want to have a holistic approach from the county to help, because what was put in place in that district is not sufficient to pay for the capital needs for the capital went to purchasing those properties, and there is not enough capital
Right, I
to
understand
do
that.
that.
I understand, but
So
what
I
you're
do
talking
think
about
what
now is
council
preserving
decided-
more.
No, I think what council decided, I think there's a difference between preservation and a park.
Well, there's probably 2 components to this.
There's
You
very
got
different-
preservation, which relates to parks, which goes to Health and Environmental Committee, because that's what we worked on. And then in the economic development priorities, preservation is a priority. We just heard it in our meeting just a few minutes ago. It is a priority. It is in the top 3, just like this, it is a priority that the Economic Development Office is working on. So Tom just mentioned a minute ago, there's some bleed over of these topics that may start in one committee and actually then go to another committee to work on. But that's what progress is, so I see,
I definitely think this
it could start economic development, the
actually
preservation piece
think-
can, and then it could go to a different committee. It could
As
go
we're-
to
I
Health
agree.
and Environmental.
It's a
Yeah, I
fluid
think it's-
thing, and I think we need to have input from all of
I
us.
think you gotta define what preservation is, what it exactly is that you're
Well,
wanting to
So
preserve.
you'd have, Mitch, is Mitch here?
But-
We don't need to do
But,
that.
but,
We're not talking about economic development.
Well,
I
it's
think
not-
that's
it's
what
not-
I'm
it's
saying.
not economic development preservation.
yeah,
It's
well,
not
what,
economic
In the meeting that we just had, what
It's
we
land
said,
preservation.
no, what we
That's
said
part
in
of
that
the
meeting
economic
was that
development
everything,
initiative.
what we said in our meeting, just before this meeting, was that what we were talking about as preservation was all for economic development use.
Remember,
We all
right,
agreed to
remember
that.
that,
That was from the field.
remember the input that Tommy's having on the economic development piece on agriculture? That has to do with preserving land. That's why I
We're
say,
gonna move
that's
this
why I
one
say
to
that
the
piece goes up to economic development.
I
Alright,
think
so
we've heard y'all,
let's do
and we're
this.
ready to move on.
I think we're
y'all.
gonna, what we will do is we'll have that third, item referred, especially those additional topics referred to health and environment. All right, so next item,
Yes, so, thank you, Jonathan, appreciate that. Y'all, we are blessed as an organization with great directors and assistant directors. So our next goal, the public safety goal, which we're terming Safe Community, is led by two folks, and I want to make sure to introduce you. I'm sure you've met them, but I want to introduce you to our Public Safety Communications Director, Michael Fernandez. And he started a little bit before I did, so, 8, 9 months, been here making a great impact. Really thankful for him and his service to our county. And then the other leader is our Assistant Director of Emergency Management, Malcolm Learmore. And he's going to walk us through this presentation with Michael, answer y'all's questions about Safe Community. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you. Like you said, my name is Malcolm Learmo. I'm the Deputy Director for Emergency Management. I've been working close with Mike Fernandez for the Safe Community goal. Our group that has been heading this up is, we went ahead and pulled in more the department leaders for each of the major groups of this, being Public Safety Communication, York County Fire, and Emergency Management. And then the York County Sheriff's Office has been joining us as well. We've had Fred Moore and Heather Muzon from the Sheriff's Office, Chuck Haynes from Emergency Management with myself. I believe John Carter's been joining you, and then Morris Russell and I'm forgetting Donnie's last name right now, but Don, the Deputy Director there for York County Fire has been joining us as well. So we got together, we've been working through this, we developed the strategic goal which y'all approved. And so now we've gone through and started to make the next steps and planning out how we're actually going to accomplish the strategic goal over the next 3 years. So the short goal being the safe community, long goal being protect all residents and visitors by ensuring their safety and security through responsive, professional, and accountable emergency services. I think those 3 words, responsive, professional, and accountable, are really important to us. Those were very intentional in being placed in there. And there's a lot of reasoning behind those of why we wanted those. So that's going to be done by, that's what I like to think of when I'm going through this, is how are we going to accomplish that? That's going to be our strategies. So ensure reliable and effective emergency services. Now, if you look at your goal, this is obviously summarized. You'll see where it says improve response times to ensure reliable and effective emergency services. I like the ensuring reliable and effective emergency services because that is a big part of that. In order to improve those response times, we need to make sure that our emergency services are reliable and effective. Effective meaning we are getting the right people, the right apparatus, to the right place in the right amount of time. So it's a lot more than just getting that call dispatched or getting those officers en route, firefighters en route. It's getting the appropriate resource on that scene to provide that service to the community. And then increasing engagement in the community. This is really important. We want to start working with the community. We want to understand the community's needs. What are they expecting when they pick up the phone and call 911? What are they expecting when they pick up the phone and call a non-emergent line and are asking for questions from a sheriff's deputy or from one of Mike's people working in the dispatch center? And we also want to increase community preparedness. In this past year, we have faced 2 pretty large incidents that have occurred within York County. We had the April 20th what the Weather Service called the microburst, or that hailstorm that dropped a record amount of hail within a very small, isolated community within York County. And then we had Hurricane Helene that came through. And so we want to work very closely with our community to increase their preparedness, to increase their resilience. And then develop and retain professional staffing standards. That one speaks for itself. We'll start working within the community to develop a pipeline to bring people in to work within emergency services here in York County. And my little take on this is that pipeline doesn't end the second that they've got a York County employee badge. That pipeline needs to continue up. We need to start harvesting our leaders and bringing those from within. And then finally, aligning public safety entities. This has been a big public safety goal ever since 9/11 occurred, is making sure that we break down those silos that the public safety entities work in. We like to say that we're really good at that right now. But the truth is, we all fall into that nice little smooth sailing, daily operational things of just doing our job. And while all the operational aspects and the tactical aspects of it are working together very smoothly, they're talking as they should, we want to make sure that we're working together in a more, I hate to say it, but it's the best word for it, holistic manner. We want to be working together on projects, making sure that maybe the Sheriff's Office understands something that they could contribute to a project that Mike's got going on, or a goal that Mike's got. So we're going to work really closely to start aligning those. So, our themes. First is being data-driven. One of the big things with this is working more towards evidence-based practices. Going through and actually understanding what we're improving, why we're improving it, and making sure that there's actually a reason for that. Not just saying, hey, this seems like an idea, but looking at peer-reviewed research, looking at unbiased analysis, and then tracking a lot of our analysis ourselves. Also with data-driven is going to be the industry best practices. What are other people with communities just like ours doing that we might be able to adopt and that works great? What are the practices that the professionals out there, or the leaders in this industry are doing? And what is it going to take for us to bring that into our county? And then performance management. Obviously, if we want to go through and we want to start improving and implementing different changes, we need to understand that we're doing it right. We need to understand what we're changing is actually making a difference. And we need to make sure that that difference is done safely, appropriately. And we want to continue to track so that we continue to improve and make sure that the services that we say are going to be there when they call 911 are going to continue to be there and be there effectively and efficiently. Next is community engagement. Now, I hate it. Mitch and Jonathan, they've got a much better one, Stronger Communities. I wish I'd have stolen that one before. But community engagement, we want to bring the community in, start breaking down a lot of those barriers between us and the community. Why is it that we have certain barriers built there? What do we need to do to break those? How can we make the community a little bit more prepared during disasters? What's something that out there that we can do to improve the community's resilience? So first is going to be that public understanding and needs. Start looking at satisfaction. If someone calls 911, were they satisfied with the services that we deliver? If they weren't, why weren't they? What can we do to meet those standards? And then improve community preparedness. I've hit on this a lot, but we want to break down a lot of those barriers. One thing that I like to think about with this is when I was in graduate school, I learned about the Chicago heat wave in 1995. And heat wave came through Chicago. They don't have air conditioning up there. Well, at least they didn't in 1995, like it's probably prevalent nowadays. And a lot of people died because no AC, they start dying. Well, they started to look back at that. Why did all these people die during this heat wave in Chicago? And they started to notice very different, strong differences between communities that had higher death rates and lower death rates. And that big difference was that sense of community and those people going and checking on each other. And so this becomes a question of how do we instill that sense of community within your county? Quality staff and services. So we want to start bringing that pipeline, having people within this county that we can bring into emergency services. And then we want to start looking at the training and qualification standards, making them uniform, making sure that no matter where you are in this county, you're going to have the highest and best service delivered to you, regardless of jurisdiction, regardless of place within the county. Whoever shows up is going to be the highest qualified and the most well-trained to be there. And then finally, coordination. This is going to be a comprehensive engagement, bringing all of the public safety entities and even those that have nothing to do with public safety into the picture. And one thing I can tell you is Public Works plays a major role in a lot of what we do. And Eric can probably agree with you there. We call him on a regular basis when something's going wrong. We want to start looking at that in that manner, bringing people in, looking to accomplish things that will benefit our community. Continued improvement is a big part of the coordination aspect. We don't want to just get really good and then say, all right, we're done. We want to continue to improve, continue to grow. That's going to link right back into that data-driven and performance management. We need to know that what we're doing is appropriate, what we're doing is safe, what we're doing is actually an improvement, and then we want to drive that improvement moving forward. And finally, under the coordination is going to be a 5 to 10 year multi-service strategic plan. We're going to take a lot of what we find out with the Safe Community strategic goal and start implementing it and start putting it into place. And so this is a breakdown of what I've just gone through. So data-driven, being evidence-based, industry best practices, and performance management. Where are we? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? Community engagement. What's the public need? What do they want? What do they expect when they pick up that phone and call 911? How do we do that? And how do we make our county more resilient? Finally, next, quality staff and services. What can we do to train our emergency responders better? How can we bring them up to a higher standard? what qualifications do we need? And then finally, how do we get that employee pipeline where we're not only bringing employees in, but we're training our next leaders? And coordination, engagement, engaging all the different sectors of public safety and even a lot of those outside of it. Continued improvement, driving each other to be better, and then implementing what we find out with this plan and the 5 to 10 year strategic plan.
Malcolm? I know we're throwing a lot at y'all,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
a great
Yeah.
opportunity.
It's a lot,
This
man.
is an exciting
It's
goal.
like sponging it in.
Well, and before, Tom, before you speak out, I think one thing, having learned from the last hour spent on the last one, and we do still have another topic in an executive session. I think what I'd like to do is to start out this way and just say to you, I mean, council adopted this. Does management have a recommendation about how we approach? Obviously, response times and safety is important, and we need to, all of these things are important. What's your recommendation for how we move forward with this? Do you have one before we just independently talk?
So I'm committed as manager to do all the initiatives in this entire plan over the next 3 years. So if you ask me for my recommendation, I'm gonna tell you, we're working on all of this. But as staff, what I've asked the goal champions to do with their teams is to think about their priorities and where we start. There's things that are important, foundational to do in year 1 that will help you achieve the other initiatives in year 3. I think for us, we're laying the groundwork for the 5 and 10 year strategic plan for 5. I've committed a lot of time to that already. David's committing time to that. We're gonna work hard on that. But in order to do that, you have to build the foundation of data. We haven't had a lot of data in some of our departments. So we've had to work with GIS and others to build that foundation of data so we can inform this work. And so a lot of these things are tied together. I think the other piece is when you do a 5 and 10 year plan of the different public safety agencies, you're having to look at staffing and recruiting and what do we need to do to keep our employees. And so I think that we could easily tell you our priorities, but I don't want to take away from y'all's feedback. And so we're happy to do that, but to me we've got to figure out fire service here in York County. We've got to get to the bottom of that. EMS is a part of this as well. We've started that work. We had a great conversation with all of our EMS stakeholders to start this week on Monday morning. But we can't do any of that if we don't have amazing employees that are supported in our agencies and we're coordinating that work across those agencies. And so I think kind of hearing data and strategic planning related to some of these agencies would be my priority. But I'm happy to ask Michael and Malcolm to answer that question as well, if y'all want to.
I'll just say real quick, I think the data is a really big part of that and establishing your standard of care. In my past career, standard of care is what you kept the minimum at. That's your standard, whether, no matter what you were doing with your improvement process, you were always keeping that standard of care. And so, if you were doing an improvement process and looking at changing and implementing something new, then you always make sure that standard of care was gonna be met. Well, right now, I think getting that data is gonna give us that standard of care, because we don't have that right now. We have what is anecdotally a standard of care.
So real quick, I think with this and the one prior that we spoke of, I think we need to look at dependencies first, right? So baseline data is the dependency, right? So identify what those dependencies are, and that's foundational for, as you move forward. So, but with this, there's two observations, and the first one is, my concern with this is that the county itself, we can't create donut holes, right? Can't create donut holes, so we need to make sure as we do this, we need to make sure we have great communication with all of our law enforcement, whether it's Rock Hill, Fort Mill, TDK, across the board. So no donut holes are created, because that's only gonna cause issues and concern. The other observation I have, and what I heard during the last storm and stuff, is our quality, our quantity of communication and the quality of communication. Communication is key during those events, right? So how can we better improve communication from the beginning of an event to the end of an event? What are lessons learned out of that issue, the microcell that came through? And we look at how we communicate to the public. You know, what means that we're doing that? Because again, if we have all this great stuff and we can't communicate back out on where we're at with an event that's going on, then we're falling behind.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So that would be my observations. Yeah.
But then also, Josh, like we have talked on the fire, as you're building that program with their input, and which, I'd also imagine when Tony coming online, which is gonna also play a big part and come up to speed,
Right.
which, once y'all get this to come together, I imagine y'all gonna come back and brief us anyway,
You got that right.
so
Yeah, it's gonna build, and so
Yeah.
we'll be coming back with updates. The question is, do you want that to be at a committee, or do you want that to be the full council? With fire, I've laid out this plan to the fire chiefs, and they're all on board. We're gonna be working individually, David and I, with them, to do a SWOT of each department, and then bring them all together this year to do a SWOT all together. And so we're building that foundation with them, and that's gonna take a sizable amount of time before we're even able to move to the next step. So that initiative itself will take a couple of years to achieve, but we'll come back in for check-ins throughout that. Any other feedback?
I think our JPS committee is the one that's dedicated to this. I mean, I'm glad to hear that we're working on all these. Clearly, we have to get the data so that we know how to take the next steps, but I think we need to move quickly, and I expect that JPS will start meeting regularly, starting at the beginning of the year, to decide when there are things that need to come forward to council for decision-making. I do think that it's important that there be accountability, and that we work as expeditiously as possible to the 5 to 10 year strategic plan. Unfortunately, our council's talked about this way too long, and that needs to be done. That needs to be done within the next, I think we need to have that done in the next year. I heard you say two. I think we've got to have a plan.
Yeah.
Well, look, we're gonna work with the chiefs. We're committed to getting it done. We've got to see what we get out of that engagement with the chiefs, and then what's left to do after that. I think we'd be happy if it's done in a year or two, so we'll definitely shoot for that.
but just get me something to have the JPS meeting.
I heard that. We're gonna do that. We got something.
I'm gonna make one quick comment with this. No matter what, it's this one, the last one we spoke about. At the end of the day, it's all about taxpayer dollars, right? And everything's gotta be a check and balance. And where we can value it, you know, whether we improve an area, that's an improved value that we can put back to the other side. So we can go out there. This is not about raising taxes. This is not about that. This is about being efficient with the taxpayer dollars. And we've got to be very diligent as we go through both of these initiatives.
Okay, thank you. So, when I joined council 2 years ago, council committed $300,000 to the Chamber of Commerce to work on a workforce development initiative. $100,000 over 3 years. I think we're in the second year right now, and they just were awarded the #1 Chamber of Commerce in the Carolinas a lot to do with their workforce development initiative. So we took an outside entity and we made an investment in them to have an impact on economic development and workforce in York County. All right, so I want to compare that initiative to this, and I think it falls into safe communities. And this is not necessarily an issue for York County right now, but it could be, it is an issue in York County. It's not an issue for York County right now, but I want to explain this. So, homelessness. When The Rock was in York County offering services to the homelessness, it wasn't really an issue or an expense to the county because we had an outside entity handling this. When The Rock closed, then Pathways, Lifehouse, and Bethel had to step up and provide services. So I think it's important to note that homelessness in York County is an issue. It's not necessarily an issue that we have to fund, but I think it is important to know that. There are more than 3 entities, but those are the 3 largest entities in this county, and their budgets are at $2.7 million a year. Those 3, their budget's at $2.7 million a year. Their budget is derived 70% from sources other than federal, state, or municipalities. So less than 30% comes from entities other than private gifts, theoretically, okay? 70%. So we're fortunate in York County that we're not funding the 2.7 million, or we're not working with municipalities to fund 2.7 million to deal with 1,500 people a year that come through just those three entities. There are more entities than that. We don't have to fund that expense. But I think that gift, that we don't have to fund that expense, is not a reason to ignore the issue that we have homelessness in York County. And I'm not suggesting, I'm saying we need to keep that on our radar, and there might be something that we need to do, because if you can imagine, if the 70% that's contributed to their budgets begins to dwindle and go away. So if we go into a recession as an example, which recessions tend to happen every 10 years, we're in an anomaly right now, but when it happens and those private donations drop, and some of those entities, maybe Bethel, maybe Pathways, maybe Lifehouse, and others have to shut their doors, then the sheriff's department already has a big issue on their hands now. They're gonna have a larger issue on their hands. And it could be that we find ourselves in the business of dealing with homelessness like Mecklenburg County does. So, as we look at safe communities, I think we cannot overlook what's going on with homelessness and try to be actively deciding maybe what we need to do to invest in this creatively to make sure that the entities that are providing these services and aren't costing the taxpayers money, that we support them.
So I might have failed in that coordination one, there is a specific,
There's an initiative.
initiative for that. And that is, I came from Mecklenburg County, that was where my prior career was. I know about the homelessness problem there. We were starting to approach it in very unique manners. We're starting to look at it, instead of it being a law enforcement problem, but actually being us getting involved as well. So that is something that I would like to see us as a group work together and be at least very cognizant of it and how we intend to handle it.
Well, I think in the same respect, we need to get out and probably meet with the entities that are doing the work in this space right now and learn what they're doing and figure out how we can support and complement what they're doing, which include community services and coordination.
Yeah, it's an initiative. We got 100 initiatives.
That's right.
And so that's why we're looking to y'all for priorities, because we know there's things we need to work on first, and that's something we're gonna do, but we gotta get a sense from y'all what your priorities.
I agree, and I issue this in two ways. One is just recognizing what people are doing on our behalf that we're not having to fund, but there could come a day when we have to fund it, not by choice, by need. So we should be planning
A couple
towards it.
years ago, there was a heat map, a group went out and they did a heat map of where the homeless were. Is that something that we can you get that to Josh? Do you have that? Can you send that out again?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years, but.
Yeah. Just how often, do you know how often they do that?
What, is it based on the point in time, Kyle?
It was,
Yeah, I'm sure we can replicate that if we haven't.
I think the sheriff's department has that.
The money behind the gallery.
Yeah.
right, because they invited some,
Yep.
like, we could
It's
go
an
to them
annual
and
thing.
stuff like that.
Yeah, it's annual, so we
Will
can
you,
get you the
Karen,
links.
will you send, maybe all the council wants to see that, I'd like to see the latest copy of that.
Anything else, y'all?
Sir.
Madam Chair, anything else?
Thank you.
I do want to say this, thank you, Josh. I mean, you've been here, but going on 9 months, and, you know, one of the things that's just continued to frustrate me is that we know that something needs to be done, but we would ask questions and we wouldn't have the data here to get it. I'm glad that y'all are looking at the data. Response time is important. I do think it's critically important that we compare apples to apples. Unfortunately, like, what is a call, what's an appropriate call, what's not. I mean, I know you've sent some information out that includes prioritized calls, and to me, that is on deck, high priority.
Right.
Our fire service and being able to make sure that our existing community is safe, and this is a 3-year plan, but I view those things as being the high priority for this next year. We've made a commitment to the folks in fire service that we're gonna deal with this too,
That's
so
right.
I think that we need to address that.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, y'all. Thank you, Malcolm, Rick, and Michael. So in closing, y'all, as we've done the other two, so in your packet Staff has set up a survey. Now, we did a lot better the first time than we did the second time. So as we transition to this last, agenda item, if y'all would take a couple minutes to click on this and fill out the survey to prioritize from your perspective. If you don't mind, as we transition, that'll give us time to set up too.
The rest of it,
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
pretty much us.
Sorry, I didn't know your last name.
Oh, it's, man.
My bad. I had it, but I just.
You don't know, buddy.
All right, make sure y'all take this survey.
You know that.
Sorry we don't have some musical interlude in the background for y'all in the audience.
But,
Josh, you're expecting us to do this right now, so we talk about it.
If you want to try to do it in a couple minutes, and if you don't finish, we'll let
My phone is on,
And mine's on red.
So, I'm trying to get there.
yeah, we learned that in the breakfast. I said, dang, you don't think they that place up?
Whoever's.
No, I know it's not.
You're not a camera over here.
Usually, usually it just recommends you.
All right, y'all, one more minute, and then we'll, y'all can always finish it tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's gonna happen.
But they've been running, they've been.
I will pay for y'all.
Get out of it.
Well, then, my district is out of the loop. My district is in the scum. That's not true. It is. It is district.
We'll give this one more minute, y'all, and then you can always finish later. I'll respect everybody's time.
I'm not gonna be able to do this.
Yeah, mine's not coming back either.
I'll remind you tomorrow, y'all, for everybody to finish that.
That'd be great.
Norwich, is she talking about old, like, is that the Norwich one?
It's gonna take care of it.
Okay, let's get this.
All right, let's
No. Yeah, we want to get them. Hey, how you doing? Say trying to find, I guess, they walked up and said, right?
He's already getting on me.
Yeah, we're still.
Want to start, we start.
Yeah, we're gonna wait till January 24th.
So, her problem,
Tom, sir, January 20th.
January 20th, yes.
What do you say we're done?
Well, you have a week till.
All right.
like I said, Shoot us a-
I'm ready when y'all are.
But this is a separate.
Drag them out of there.
The sewer and the street is a separate.
Some dog
Followed up by some bottled water. Grilled cheese.
We're trying to do it ourselves, but I didn't go in there and get it. What did they go to Q2?
Hey, what are you,
Start having a discussion.
I guess so. I don't know, man.
I got my crackers and cheese going on.
Hey, remember, we got a meeting, guys.
All right, I think we're ready.
All right, let's do
So
it.
y'all,
Come on.
we're excited to bring you all an update on our animal shelter project. We've got our resident problem solver, our public works director, Eric Reckon, who's gonna kick us off. So I'm gonna kick it to him to introduce.
All right, so thanks for being here. We have a CPO here tonight who did the architectural conceptual design. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody like why we're here, why we proceeded with this concept design for renovation and expansion of the shelter. You all know space needs growth. That's the primary moving thing that why we're here. And it's the easiest to understand. The shelter was built in 2004. At that time, population in York County was about 184,000. Here we are 20 years later, we're at about 300,000. In that time, there's been no increase in size of the shelter or kennels. However, we have drastically improved our community programs at the direction of Bobby Comer most recently. So, but the building no longer accommodates all of our needs to serve the public. So, in addition to space, as you listen to this presentation, there's three other main justifications you got to consider: animal welfare, employee and volunteer work environment, and the community and resident experience. So you have safety. You'll hear in this that the improved kennel design, it allows our kennels to be cleaned without having to physically move animals through the hallway. Our halls and corridors will be designed to adequately transport animals back and forth. The medical suite will be adequately sized for safe movement of our vet staff and animals. A big consideration in here is flow. How animals and staff move through the facility to reduce the spread of disease. And also there's exterior flow where we offer a lot of community programs where, like TNR for instance, where people are dropping off animals, there's an improved traffic flow that they will go into as well. And lastly, the environment. Cleaner, brighter environment, properly conditioned spaces. You all probably heard we have some HVAC issues at the facility, and just an overall inviting experience when you get there. We have this great program in South Carolina. We're one of the best, believe it or not, animal control facilities or animal shelter facilities in the state. We want a facility that matches our programs and what we provide to the citizens. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kevin briefly to talk about the history of how we got here.
And I sort of went back and looked at the calendar prior retreats. We started talking about this in the spring of 2020. At that point, we had identified the HVAC problems we had, and we budgeted a study for the HVAC work. Next year, we put $1 million in the budget for the HVAC. Numbers came back at over $4 million. We started looking at what are we doing here, what's the best thing to do. There was discussion and thoughts of building a second building somewhere along I-77 or up north, type thing. We put a budget of $8 million out there for that. 2 years ago, we started talking, that's just not a good plan, not going to work. So then we decided we wanted to build one animal shelter centrally located, and that evolved, and we wanted to build it on this site. I think that was the decision ultimately got advised that council last year. We're discussing animal shelter this has been on our radar for a long time now. We've been working on this, and, you know, I honestly feel like it's time for us to get this addressed. This is one of the core functions the county provides and must provide. It's not optional, we must provide it. And as Eric went through, there's a litany of reasons as to why this needs to be done. And, you know, I think we've engaged a great firm. You all heard from them when they presented the coroner's presentation, same group. And I expect they'll do a great job tonight explaining to you as well. I just want to get some background on this.
Ready? All right. Thank you very much for having us. You heard a little bit from Eric and Kevin about why this project and kind of the history of how we've come to where we are today. I'll go through briefly our team introductions, who worked on it from our end, the scope of work that we were looking at on this project. So this is really just a feasibility study master plan at this point. The budget that we pulled together, and then next steps. So my name is Rachel Nilsson. I'm an architect with CPL. I have Stuart Klein here, senior interior designer with CPL. We had two subject matter experts, Ari and Danielle, who are both very familiar with animal shelters, working across the Carolinas. As we dived into the scope of work on this project, again, from a master plan feasibility standpoint, our first step was to develop the program. So for us, that means what are the spaces, the types of spaces, how many of them, and what size are they, and what are their functions. And with that, we dived pretty deeply into a lot of discussion on the growth needs. So a lot of research had been done before we came on board about what some of those numbers look like and analysis of some of those numbers. I'll get to that in a second. We met with stakeholders, so we met with Bobby, the York County Animal Services Director, Engineering and Public Works, throughout the project to make sure that we were getting input from all of the right sources at the beginning of the project, and we can then develop the goals and the vision from the start. That will translate into a conceptual floor plan, which you'll see in a little bit. We looked at the site, so Eric mentioned the flow. With TNR, with parking, with outside areas for play yards for the dogs, livestock areas. So that was really important as we worked through the project on an existing site with some site constraints in an existing building. And then we pulled together a cost estimate. And for us, and you'll see this, that's not just a construction cost estimate, that's a project budget. So that's understanding like what are all of those different costs that you might have that aren't just related to construction for this. So as we looked at those growth needs, so what you see in the two dashed lines right here are those current dog kennel in red and cat kennel in blue counts. What we're proposing in this plan are these two lines up here. And so you'll see that this chart actually starts at 2020. So as you may suspect, between 2020 and 2022, numbers were a little off compared to previous years because of all of the stuff that happened during COVID, because of not operating at kind of standard operating levels. But then in 2022 to 2024, you can see that we've seen these growth lines that are generally pretty steady. And so what we are looking at is really trying to take those growth and project it out, and that's where we're coming up with some of those proposed dog and cat kennel numbers. This is also showing average counts, so peak numbers are higher than these averages, but we're not necessarily designing for peak, knowing that that's not where we are at all times. Once we determined what some of those numbers were, the program, talking through the program with that stakeholder team, we started to really dive into, and what this really is a flow diagram. So talking about how, from a staff perspective, from a visitor perspective, from a volunteer perspective, and then also really importantly from the animal perspective, how do we get between the different areas and make all of those different pathways safe? So there's a lot of challenges right now with cats and dogs crossing paths in the current facility because of the way that the flows work. And so this is really trying to resolve a lot of those issues and those concerns. One thing I'll note too, so you'll see later some of the the dog kennel areas. One thing of note that's kind of a change from the existing is increasing the medical space available in this facility. To be able to have those different medical procedures and all of that available on site and have the needed resources. From an overall plan perspective, going through high level, not sure how easily the colors you can see, but all of the yellow parking that you see here is existing parking. The blue parking here is all new parking. The light gray building here is the existing building, and then the darker gray building here is the addition, building addition. A couple of things to note, so we have a couple play yards, 3 different play yards intended primarily for the dogs and with close proximity to the dogs. We've reconfigured the entrance to this facility to making it easier to access and also bringing flow around towards the back for that intake in a more secure area. There's an added pavilion and added parking in this area specifically for TNR, for those peak times with people coming in, but also gives an opportunity for more community engagement and more events or different adoption events that might be happening. There's a livestock barn and a yard down toward this bottom area here. And again, they have expanded and secured the staff parking separate from all of the visitor parking. There's also a walking path around the facility to help with staff and volunteers with areas to walk dogs or move around outside of just those play yards. Looking at the proposed facility itself, starting kind of in the biggest area you see, all of that orange. So all of these orange spaces here are the dog kennels. Again, this is the proposed addition area. The purple spaces are cat kennels. Yellow spaces are public areas. Green is intake space. And then blue is medical space. So again, trying to separate those different spaces so that that flow works a lot better. From an overall perspective, we're adding about almost doubling the size of the facility. And a lot of that comes in the increased kennel counts and in the surgery spaces, or medical spaces, I should say. And that's increased kennel counts for both cats and dogs. Again, there is that close proximity to the play yards that you see. And there are walkways between each of the kennels. One feature, and I'll show some pictures on the next slide here of the kennels. The proposed kennel design does have kind of this angled front. That's for better visibility for staff of the dogs. That's for better use of those kennel areas. And also each kennel has an outside area, covered outside area. That's kind of what Eric or somebody mentioned earlier about having a space for those dogs to go where they don't have to be moved by staff in order to clean the kennel. So a lot less time for staff to be able to have to take, and a lot safer for them not to have to bring dogs into the hallways and move them around in order to clean each of those kennels. And so here are a couple images. On the left, those are what I mentioned with kind of those angled fronts. So again, better visibility into each of those kennels that you can see. And then on the right, you can see right here, these are what we're proposing for those exterior kennels. So again, adjacent to each and every kennel, dog kennel, there's that exterior area with that walking path and play yards. So the play yards won't necessarily look just like this. From a project budget standpoint, starting at the bottom, projected construction costs for this facility are at $21 million. That is for the addition, the site work, and all of the renovation of the existing facility. Working our way up, we have lines in there for inspections, FF&E, owner contingency, and design and construction administration. So that's a lot of what we can call kind of soft costs. That's what helps make up your total project budget, with that total project budget being at that 25.9 million. And one thing I didn't know is what we are looking at is potentially a 4-phase project in order to keep the facility fully operational at all times.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yep.
Hello, counselors, good evening. I've got a very small role, but I think a significant role in this, particularly with this slide. First, I'd like to share an observation. I did have the opportunity to tour the animal shelter facility last week. We were doing good deeds and delivering gifts to employees from the county manager's office. But I think if you actually go out there and see what's going on, the crowding and so forth, it's not going to be sustainable for very long. It is overcrowded. I think the staff does a fabulous job with the resources that they have in keeping and caring for the animals. But I think everything that Eric talked about, the way he explained the why that it's needed, is very good. And I think CPL has really done their due diligence, and I think they've come up with a good concept. But in order to, I guess, keep this concept either alive or fulfilling, it seems to me there's already been some project lag with it. However, it's ultimately up to the council to decide to go forth with the project. Therefore, if you choose to commit to this project, and there's very simplified schedule line or graph there, over the last several days, we've been having discussions with Kevin, Public Works, Engineering, and really trying to put this project in the skunk works. And with all of the good ideas, we think that our goal would be, again, if you choose to commit from cradle to grave, it can be done with somewhere between 24 to 30 months, and in these various truncated stages. But we think, thanks to engineering having a very good and positive project delivery culture, they're committed, along with management, to expedite the project and begin moving into DDR at the moment that you're ready. But again, it's up to you to make that decision. But I think the due diligence has been done, and we don't, once you make a decision to go for it, should you commit, we're committed to making sure that there isn't any further project lag, which creates other problems. And we're prepared to be fully accountable and a responsibility to meet your needs once you want to greenlight this project, if you do.
So, thank you for the information, as I understand that this will be something that we're not, unless council has questions, we'll have this discussion when we have our capital discussion during the budget process.
Yeah, that is an option on the table. So we are gonna be having, hopefully, 3 workshops to talk about the budget in the coming months, January, February, March, and different pieces of the budget as we build that together. Part of that is the capital budget. This is a currently funded project, obviously not to the degree that you've heard tonight. The conversation in the capital plan can be how we're gonna make up that difference in light of everything else. And we can have that conversation in the budget workshop, building the capital plan into the future. We can answer your questions tonight. We're happy to talk more about what different steps in this process there are as well this evening.
Question. Are there any other options or variations to the layout? Because I know one thing that just popped in my mind, at our growth rate and how things are being done, I don't want to be, once we build it, whatever we build, I don't want 5 years from now saying, hey, we need more kennel space and less outside playground space. Should we be opting for more kennel space? Because we can always grow the outside, we can't grow the inside. so that was a thought that popped in my mind as far as, you said we're almost doubling the size, but maybe we need a little more under the roof space versus outside. So I just wondered if there was any options to the current layout.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in if you want as well. We're trying to balance the growth with still kind of the budgets. So obviously, the more interior space you build, the more costly it's going to be. And if the projection for a usage of that space isn't until 10 years out in the future, or 20 years out in the future, whatever, you've probably far exceeded other spaces that you need within your building as well. So I don't know if you want to speak to kind of the counts and kind of where that is.
Yeah, as far as layouts, we did work with Bobby and her group as well as all of York County on the layouts. I think we came up with 2 or 3 iterations that slowly just merged into one, kind of based off best practices. We are somewhat constrained on the site as far as where we're able to expand, so the thought was this meets the needs that we have projected. It fits within the site. I think there is a little more availability to expand on the site if we needed to explore more kennels and consider that, but as Rachel mentioned, it does come with a price tag.
From a budgetary perspective, what do you think the annual impact is gonna be on our budget for staffing, once this is fully built?
Operational impact.
Mhm.
The size of this building, Eric, you chime in if I'm getting it wrong, but we're not planning to add additional staff when we get into this building. Just like every other department of the county, the staff will grow as the needs are warranted. But building this building does not trigger 3 more FTE, anything like that. Okay.
Well, I remember going through the budget this past year, looking specifically at animal control, and they appear to be understaffed. So there's gotta be some kind of impact to the budget.
The
If we're
building
gonna
won't
address
drive
either
the
one.
staff, the workload will drive the staff.
Okay.
And part of the hope is going through this presentation, there's efficiencies gained within inside this building versus what we have now. When we walked through, it was cleaning time, and you could see how difficult it was to move animals in and out, and what we got to walk through when we went through the last week. There's gonna be a lot of efficiencies gained in this layout design and how the staff operates and volunteers operate inside the building, but, you know, we've always added staff as warranted and needed, not based off, we've got 3 open office spaces, if that makes sense.
And I think you make a good point in terms of thinking about capital projects and the operating impact. One of the things we'll work to do in our CIP as we roll that out is to have a clear line within each project of what we expect the operating impact to be. Maybe we have different supplies on this that we don't have the need for right now potentially, but those are details we can get as we get closer.
And how many dogs will this have?
And,
151 total. And that's-
151.
That's including.
And how many cats?
174.
174. And bring the number back up, what y'all say that'll cost?
25 months.
Yeah, project budget 25.9.
25.9. Okay, would it be unrealistic to get a itemized cost of how y'all come to that number? Because I'm telling you right now, you can build 1,000 cow facility dairy for less than that.
Let's,
And I can give you the numbers on that.
Mr. Atkins, if you don't mind, if we can, this is the first time that we've seen this information. I don't know that we're in a
It's
position.
true.
And I think there probably will be a lot of questions. I think what I would ask is that you send this PowerPoint to all of the council members, and that we have this discussion in our budget discussions when we have this, you know, our capital improvement discussions.
Well, since we're talking about this, I mean, we've had citizens come to council for the last 2 years since I've been on council, talking about.
10.
Yeah, I know, but since I've been on council for 2, discussing prevention measures. And, I mean, we're projected to double in size from 300 to close to 600,000 in the next 20 years, York County is, which means this issue, as Bump says, is going to continue to grow. And whatever we do, we've got to have an initiative on prevention. I saw on the slide before, the cat population decreased and it took off. Why is that? How'd that happen? And then I've been to the facility, Bobby was nice enough to walk me through the facility with Eric when I joined council, so I've seen it. 90% bully dogs, why is that? I think we need to I'm not opposed to doing something for animal control, but I think we need to dig into prevention, and we need to have an impact on this, so that we're not faced with what Bump said 20 years from now, figuring out where we're gonna build the next facility or add on to the current facility.
There's definitely a policy conversation to be had as well.
Okay, good.
If we can,
That's needs to be a priority for sure.
if, when you develop this, I understand that y'all use some, other areas as ideas, throughout the state. Perhaps taking a look at their, did y'all take a look at their policies and how they may or may not be different than what the county is doing currently when taking this into effect, or was it just?
For design or for
Yeah,
design of the
yeah.
facility or for policies?
I'm curious to know within the design, whether or not you took into account the policies that the other areas that this is kind of mapped off on use.
Yeah, so for the most part, a lot of the policies are in the numbers of the animals, which isn't necessarily from the design perspective. From the design perspective, I mean, one thing to note is the current dog kennels are 4 feet by 6'8", but it is actually a York County ordinance that those kennels are required to be 6 foot by 10 foot. And so some of it is an alignment to some of the York County standards and guidelines, which is still, those numbers are best practice as well, to be at the 6 by 10, not 4 by 6'8".
So, just because we are on a, I think we are on a time crunch, we've got, if what we can do is you can send that information, if council has additional, I hear you loud and clear that what's frustrating is that this existing building was built in 2002, 4? That's ridiculous that we're already here. And clearly, the longer we wait, this is languished. I mean, the last I heard of this, it was a $16 million project, and this is increased, so obviously, we're hearing the point, we need to make a decision, and that decision needs to be made at the time we're doing the other capital improvement discussions, but I think that the council has committed, prior funding to this, and we've spent this time and effort for you guys to do that. If you'll just share that, and any other questions that council has about the design, make sure that you send that to Josh, and any other questions we'll have, we can answer through that.
I'll send out a slide deck.
Yeah, the only thing, you don't need to answer now, but have we gone to the state for funding or opportunity where they may participate? And again, just let me know on the side, just again. Thank you.
Where was the farm animal section? Is that?
In this lower area.
Is that just like a holding area?
It is.
Well, there's
There's
a
a
small
barn,
barn right there.
and then this is more of a.
I mean, I know y'all had a lot more farm animals in the last couple of years.
Yes. This is not housing 100%.
No. All right, thanks, y'all.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we had two items here, and it is a proposed contractual matter, economic development initiative. Second is contractual matter receipt of legal advice, Project Freedom and Project Freedom 2.
Have a motion to a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, we'll move into executive session. We are out of executive session, no action was taken, do we have a motion?
Motion to adjourn? Second.
Motion, second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.